Curmudgeon and Cellar. The next Tales from the Cellar, and the next Stories from the Cellar. I've not been doing those other two recently because YouTube changed the interface, changed all the way it's done. So now I'm trying to learn a new program. My great buddy Jim Wampler's helping me do this one tonight. We're backhanding it, doing a workaround to get it posted. There he is. So I appreciate the comments. No, I'm not sick. Cheryl's not sick. Everything's fine. Just my Luddite brain is not embracing new technology yet. So that's all. And no, I'm not going to do another story tonight. But for the four lovely daughters that were worried about the princess story, I don't know which princess of the 12 he picked either because the story didn't say. Sorry. Okay, here we are in lockdown again, more. Still, Cheryl and I went out yesterday. I went to one grocery store because they only want us in Ohio to go in singles, not in pairs, because two people block too much of the aisle. And she went to the other one, and we came back with enough food for another 2 weeks because it was 2 weeks since the last time we went out. And looks like we're going to be living at home for another 2 weeks. I know I'm enjoying it a whole bunch, and I'll bet you all are too. I know Jim's enjoying living it, being locked at home.
It's so sad how little of a change it is for me because I'm under socialized introvert. But it's it's getting to me. It's getting to everybody.
Well, I mean, even you enjoyed going to the meetings and having some social interaction every Monday morning, even if they were sometimes shouting matches or disagreements. Get your thoughts heard,
I mean, the first couple of weeks of lockdown were great because it was just being by yourself. Now the extroverts have all figured out the internet. So instead of at my day job, instead of one Monday meeting once a week, now we have a virtual meeting every single morning.
Well, yeah, I guess I could see where that might be a disadvantage after all. For those of us who aren't working regularly and just doing it when we want to, this has been not a hell of a lot different. We just can't go out and do things in between.
I shouldn't express anything but maximum gratitude. I'm grateful to have a day job I can do at home virtually. And, as an old mentor of mine said, I've got a roof over my head and food in my stomach. So I'm already ahead of a third of the planet right there.
Oh, yeah. I really feel for all the people who aren't working, who aren't making any money, haven't gotten their stimulus check yet. It's funny. I'm sure the Republicans that hate Democratic and socialist ideas can't wait to get that check. And I bet Democrats will cash it, even though it does have his name on it. It's kind of like they're both going to go to the bank with their fingers on their noses. I find that pretty funny.
I forgot where we are. We are curmudgeons in the cellar tonight. So, all that sunshine, rainbows, and ponies gratitude aside, I'm getting really sick of natural selection having a knife fight with human stupidity in the front yard of my planet every day.
Well, the circus of fools has definitely gone into an encore act the last few days. I'm just I don't know what Woody Harrelson is smoking, but he's got to quit.
Now, bless your heart.
Yeah, it's sinuses. Yeah, but he's now on the 5G thing. He thinks 5G is causing coronavirus.
Oh, don't you?
Yeah, Woody Harrelson. I used to respect him. So anyway, that answers the first question I had tonight. It's a couple of days since you've seen a video. That's why. Now, if you're not one of the people that hang around for, that want to listen to the game part of this, and that's fine. just glad to see you all, and I'll be back as soon as I can with my regular scheduled stories and stuff. So that takes care of that. What's the rule for recharging wands? Can magic users give them new charges? Well, I don't know right offhand if there's a formal rule for that. I'm sure John Scott could tell me. But as I recall, Gary used to handle it that you had to pay to get your wand recharged. You have to find a magic user of a high enough skill level that they could handle whatever the spell recharge was again and again and again, and you had to pay for all the physical elements and you know the phoenix feathers and whatever else it took for each one you wanted a boost on, less about 20%. I think that was about his rule of thumb. So if it cost 6,000 gold to create a certain spell and you wanted to do it 10 times, then that was 60,000 less 20%, 48,000 gold to get your wand recharged. I believe Gary did it that way because it sucked money out of the campaign like nobody's business. I think that's something that you have to work out in your campaign based on your economy. Do you have an inflationary economy, or do you have a recessionary type economy? I have a recessionary type of economy in my world set. 16,000 pieces of gold is a small fortune. To get, and in some campaigns, 16,000 pieces of gold is, what you're still on the ground loading up the real stuff. So I think that's where that comes from. Jim, you have a thought on that?
Oh, sure. I was about a year ago in a OD&D Swords and Wizardry campaign Matt Finch was running, and to keep a first level magic user alive, he had us find a wand of fireballs, which was great for me. I couldn't have been happier. And
I'm sure
he just adjudicated it real off the cuff. It held 10 charges. It had an unknown number of charges, and if you burned the last one out, it was dead. Then same thing you said. Go find a 8th level magic user who can recharge it, and this is what it costs. And that's what my whole life became about. Have enough gold to keep that thing charged to stay alive with like 5 hit points.
And wondering if you're gonna use one. I really, really, really need one more shot. Will it be the last one? Because you don't know how many you started with.
Well, game design or GM wise, here's the key. Do whatever you got to do as long as it's fun, because it cuts both ways.
Oh yeah.
Matt created something that was a in-game challenge and was fun to do, so I was all in. My brother, when he was in high school, got all up his butt about material components. You had to get material components for everything, trying to tamp down my magic user, and I quickly learned to drag the acquisition of material components out into so much game time, he started hand-waving it.
Yeah, every
that wasn't
DM
fun.
Every DM you hope has that limit where you just draw him to it. And he goes, yeah, okay, forget it. Kind of like me years ago. Yeah, okay, I don't worry about that stuff. I assume you're smart enough to have it with you. Otherwise, how could you bring the spell? Last time we talked about hirelings and how hirelings used to be used, and then some people abused them. And then DMs realized that no, you can't abuse them because you're not going to hire any, no matter how big the town is. Eventually, your reputation for not coming back with the hirelings. So someone proposed a new module named Revenge of the Hirelings. Well, I like the concept, but here's the problem. It could only work if it was a colossal screw job by the DM. You let them hire a bunch of people who you knew are just waiting for a chance to tie them all up and leave them in an oasis somewhere and make off with all their loot. I don't imagine you'd keep that group for very long. or they keep you, or you end up like B.A. Felton, tied up and hanging from the light in the kitchen.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's worth writing up into a module, but Jolly Blackburn, there was a storyline in Knights at Dinner Table. Like, it was more a case of NPCs and hirelings, but there were a couple of NPCs like Sir Gilead that they screwed over, then just went about their merry business, come back years later in game time, and he's running a whole kingdom.
Well,
and a pain in their butt now.
Then there was the pack ape. The pack ape keeps showing up, and he's really pissed off. And I mean, yeah, Jolly got the idea, because they had torch bearers and pack bearers and mule tenders and fire makers, and they took it to enormous. They traveled with a retinue of about 40 hirelings and NPCs. It was quite funny.
The way to write that is DCC style. Have the player characters be the NPCs that got screwed over, and with enough numbers, they could take the party down.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about DCC in our actually the next thing. I know that you are mainly into the early editions of D&D, but I was wondering what were your thoughts on the current OSR, old school Renaissance games, especially ones like Dungeon Crawl Classics. Isn't that odd? You're on here tonight, and which goes for the feel over the mechanics of the old editions. It is a D20 system, for example. Well, I don't know, is it? But it's based on the same Appendix N literature that Gary used to inspire and create his game. Well, as a matter of fact, we have the writer, the creator of Dungeon Crawl Classics here.
Whoa! Mutant Crawl Classics.
Yeah, well, that's right. But what did you write on? You worked on Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Yeah, I did a few adventures, but that's Joseph right. Goodman's baby, helped a lot by Harley Stroh and Dieter Zimmerman and Michael Curtis.
The interesting mechanic that's common to both, though, is your funnel system, your funnel thoughts, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's how I came to write MCC, because I was a massive Dungeon Crawl Classics fan.
And and I believe the writer's referring to that feel. You don't get too attached to a character because they just don't last that long. And so the fun is seeing how long they last before they die. You, I know, have read a bunch of Appendix N. I know Mike Curtis has read a bunch because we've discussed it. A lot of the people that I know that have tried their hand at RPG design are students of Appendix N, because I believe they have recognized that if they want to understand the beginning and therefore improve upon it, they got to understand the roots of where it came from. I know how many people, I can't tell you how many people, once they read The Dying Earth, they go, oh, the magic system makes sense.
Well, that was the genius of Joseph Goodman's basic conception, was to go back to first inspirations, go back to primary sources. What inspired Gary and Dave Arneson? The Appendix N list, because they gave it to us. So let's go reread all that and take fresh inspiration from the primary source. It's kind of like how TV shows go. Like, this is a terrible analogy. It's all I can think of. The old original Star Trek in the beginning was Gene Roddenberry's idea of, let's do Jonathan Swift and Tales, the Twilight Zone, and Jonathan Swift and Captain Horatio Hornblower. So let's do that in space. And in early seasons of Star Trek, or early episodes, that's what it was about. But that was 50 years ago. Over a course of time, Star Trek starts becoming less about what inspired it and more about itself. And D&D kind of did that too, where,
yeah,
I mean, I don't mean like it's a bad thing necessarily, but it got more and more up its butt.
Well, I think
I don't mean it bad.
Well, no, that's a valid comparison. I'm reading right now, speaking of our inspirations, you gave me a couple of years ago a reprint of an old Weird Tales from 1933 that has the Robert E. Howard Black Colossus in it, and I just reread that. We're starting to retread older reading material around here now, and I forgot just what an amazing writer he was, but the style that he wrote in then is so turgid over what is popular today. I mean, why use three adjectives when you can use seven with three dependent clauses and five commas? He really paints a picture, but it's, oh, come on, man, get there, come on. We're used to, because everything we do now is faster. We're used to being handed everything on a plate. We don't want to get there, and we're going to skip ahead of the words to see what's going to happen at the end. It's a whole different mindset, and sometimes I think it's good to go back and see that, because that's a lot of what Appendix N is. It's a lot more relaxed and not so frenetic.
Well, the reason it's my jam is much of it was written before the term science fiction and fantasy existed as coined and subsequently used. It was all just genre fiction. I mean, at the moment can't think of what they did call it, but I mean, Burroughs, it's swords and planets and ray guns and sorcery. It's all mixed up together. Well,
it was it was swords and sorcery fiction. If it had a sword in it, it was called couple of the magazines referred to it as themselves as magazines of swords and sorcery. That was a very distinguished title, and then it kind of fell into disfavor. But I've always referred to it as swords and sorcery.
I mean, more like how Burroughs had a lot of, fantasy in his science fiction. Lovecraft has got elements of science fiction in it.
Yeah, there's a lot of moshing, blending together there, mashing it together. I don't know growing up on reading what I was reading when I was growing up, which would have been late 50s, early 60s. You either got a science fiction story or you got a sword and sorcery story. and it seemed like one month you got 60, 40, and the next month you got 40, 60. They tried. But sword and sorcery always came out on the short end because L. Sprague Camp and Lynn Carter could only write so many stories. And there just weren't enough other people writing back then. Now, of course, it's, wow, it's all different.
Robert E. Howard is a good example. One minute it's a story about a barbarian in Hyperborea, ancient Hyperborea. The next minute it's some guy who gets shot to another planet.
Burroughs style. Yeah, or else it was some guy on a tramp steamer somewhere that sailed through some kind of a oogly boogly feeling thing, and now they're in another world or something. I mean, that was the days when, your imagination could go anywhere, and it wasn't all that odd because it was going everywhere. Now it's very channeled. There's times, too bad. Appendix N, read it. Okay, now. All right. Okay, this is a long one. Let's see. I'll see if I need my specs. Okay, thanks for answering my questions on editing. Okay, he wants to ask me about alignment. Never understood alignment as a mechanic until I got into cyberpunk and made a connection between backstories and D&D's alignment tool. Got me to thinking. From my brief research, I understand that a form of alignment was in D&D from the earliest rules. Do you know how the idea came up? Was it for characterization, backstory, or more like stat, such that a spell from a lawful source adversely affects a chaotic? Yeah, okay. Or a way of preventing certain classes from being played against type. So a knight had to be chivalrous, for example. Yes. Gary was very, and Dave, for that matter, too. I won't just paint Gary with this. They had very distinct ideas of how certain people ought to act based on the examples from history and literature of how they did act. So, if in Gary's world, if you did something that was against your alignment, he didn't say anything right then, but next time you went out somewhere and you got in a pinch and you failed, what should have been a save or whatever, you didn't question Gary. What do you mean I failed? You failed. Okay. And then you failed the next one. Well, yeah, you had bad juju piled up on you. And so you did something really heinous. You had to go on a quest to clean yourself. And you weren't even a paladin. I mean, later on when Paladins, oh well, yeah, oh you screwed up, dude. You got to go. You got to go a long way away and do a whole bunch of stuff if you want to be a prissy lily white Paladin again.
What do you mean this halfling I'm in the middle of strangling doesn't know why I lost my paladin powers?
Well, I actually had well, I've told the story before. I was in a game once with a bunch of guys who had always played evil characters. And that follows up on another, that leads to another question later. And I had assigned them all characters, and I made this guy a paladin, and he couldn't understand why horrible things are going to happen to him if he gouged out this guy's eyes that he was trying to torture for information. Talk about making him play against type. Oh, it was wonderful. And so, yeah, that's that. You can't. Gary's thought was, and Dave followed along to this to a lesser extent. You can't aspire to a certain path through life and embrace certain principles only when it's convenient. If you're a cleric or you're a magic user or you're a fighter with a patron deity, you tread the straight and narrow, whatever their straight and narrow is, whether they're neutral or lawful, or even if they're chaotic. It might be ziggy-zaggy, but it's their path. And when you veer from it, stuff happens. You don't heal as fast. You're not in good graces. That played a lot. There was a lot of that in the Greyhawk and the games that were played up in the early Lake Geneva. You had to stay right with Jesus, or you were in trouble.
I'm such a gamer in my head. I mean, not to go back to Dungeon Crawl Classics, but just for a moment, Joe wrote that into the rules because a cleric's ability to heal you is in hit dice, and every jump in alignment is one less hit dice. So in a 3-point alignment system of DCC, the only alignment to play as a player character, if you want the best chance at heals, is neutral. It's just math.
Yeah, either way can help you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And no, don't worry about going to DCC. I talk about whatever games I happen to know a little bit about or I'm asked about, and you're here tonight, so you're certainly an expert on those two. Now I don't know about alignments I only know about alignments in post-apocalyptic, in that you adhere to a program, or you adhere to I guess it's not an alignment in the traditional sense, but once you follow a path, there's no jumping onto other paths easily. And I think it's a way to limit player characters. If you're going to choose this goal as this character type, then stick with it. Don't be hopping around and min-maxing. And if it cuts down on min-maxing, I'm all for it. I love it. I embrace it.
Well, outside of medieval fantasy genre, other games don't have alignments and don't need them. And in MCC, I just made it about ancient alliances and patrons. Like if you're getting your good intel and all your spells from your patron, you're on his side now.
Well, you've
promote his agenda.
You've got a very, very narrowly defined alignment. You're in with your patron.
Well, in a sense, I mean, if you decide to worship the supercomputer because it gives you great powers and abilities, you also got to go out there and run his plans in the world, or the power stop coming. Like paladins, almost.
Well, I like that. It's an interesting mechanic. If you've got an attentive GM, they're going to prompt people about, hey, you need to be buffing up your alignment here a little bit. Because Gary would do that. He would take you aside and say, usually he would let something happen to you. But sometimes he'd take you aside and say, your soul, in effect, your soul is a little tarnished. You might want to look at buffing that up a little bit, And so in that sense, it had a lot of impact on the play of the game. You chose. It's just like whose colors you're going to put on, and once you put those colors on, you're committed to them. There's no jumping around. Now,
I think I love that so much of what is still in D&D today comes out of rules Gary had to write because all his home group and play testers were guys like Ernie and Rob Kuntz and you and your college crew. You know, hard-bitten, two-fisted wargamers.
Oh yeah, don't forget Terry Kuntz either, the inventor.
Oh, Terry, yeah.
You know, I mean, this guy thought up the Beholder. Is that in hardcore? I don't know what is. I certainly. Well, this leads into the next one. Have I ever discussed evil PCs? Well, you know, yes, I have a little. I once wrote a short adventure for Ralph Parther where everybody was an orc or a goblin, and they got their evil on when they went off to find and loot a dwarven tomb in the mountains, and they had the chance to slaughter a human caravan. And
that wasn't even that long ago, right? That was like for Chaos Wars Kickstarter a couple years ago.
Yeah, a couple of years ago was all. And so, you know, as every once in a while, I think it is kind of fun to get your evil on and be orcs or be goblins or, you know, something like that. I really have never seen a campaign that lasted any length of time where they're all evil that I would want anything to do with whatsoever. Those guys, two of which I'm still friends with. In fact, two of which I played with in Virtual GaryCon. Still friends. I would not have played in their evil campaign for anything. Even as jaded as I've become, there's just some stuff they were doing that just creeped me out. There's a lot of people I know that quail at killing baby bad things.
Oh, the baby goblin dilemma.
Right. That's a big thing. Now, Knights of the Dinner Table, no problem. They want to know why they didn't get more EPs for a baby. That, you know. But there are people that get squeamish about that. I would get squeamish about that were I not fully immersed in the story of it thing, but I can understand that. Ew, I don't want to do that. Just as there's some people that don't like the idea of slitting anything open and poking through the entrails to see if they ate any gems lately. I don't.
Well, you got to know your group. I mean, some of this is play style preference or just personal taste, and you got to know your group and your guys.
Well, now without naming any names, but their initials are Iron Wind. Have perhaps still a campaign that's they're nasty to the bone.
Yeah.
They are nasty.
I know how they play.
Bone. And I mean, they just and their old group, which kind of broke up a while ago and then regrouped together, but not with all of them. They did heinous things to each other, let alone anything they came up against. So, you know, as a once in a while have fun, okay, I guess. I don't know. I just get a little squeamish about the idea of I wouldn't, if I was playing Aces and Eights or any Western game, I don't think I'd want to be Quantrill slaughtering the people in Lawrenceville or Lawrenceburg, Kansas. I don't think I could enjoy that.
Well, I hear you. Like, okay, if you as a human being, as a player, are having fun, Gatling gunning down innocent people, you and your group have fun doing that, more power to you. At my table...
Don't ask me to come play at your group.
Well, I personally prefer the murder hobo-ish style.
Yes.
And my players who helped me create MCC were kind of murder hobo-y, and I'm fine with that. And you can just, what's the rule? You can try anything. Tell me what you want to do. then it's on me as a judge to just make sure that the dispassionate results of your actions fall naturally.
Yes, dispassionately, of course.
Do my best.
Yes. Sometimes you just can't help laughing at what they decided they were going to do. Okay. My wife wants to know. Your wife wants to know. Why didn't you just say you wanted to know? My wife wants to know if you have a particular, why blame your wife? Come on, if I have a particular fondness for any other RPGs besides OD&D. He says, I'm finally caught up with the Curmudgeon after binging them over the last few months. Hope you're still doing well, Tim. Yes, I am doing well. And for your wife's information, yeah, there's a couple, and I've mentioned them already. There's a couple that I enjoy fooling with, and that's Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics. I like the concept. I like the impermanence of the characters. I like the improbability of the circumstances. And if there was one other one, and this is an esoteric exotic one that I knew somebody that was running it and knew what they were doing, I would like to play Mouse Guard.
Oh, see, you picked a good one.
That is such a simplistic game, and you get credit for following your nature. If your nature is that you always meet the unknown at the point of your sword, and you do that, however it came out, you still get credit for having followed your nature, played true to your role. It's got some really interesting, simplistic concepts. So I would play that. I've had to play AD&D a few times in celebrity games. I played.
You played DCC in a celebrity game I was privileged to run.
Yeah, but that's the one where I ended up with all those 800 eyes on the top of my spidery body. Yeah, that was fun. It was. I ended up.
I don't want to start anything, but remember when my brother hit your campaign you were running for a while here locally, and like quickest first-time player death ever by running up that statue and grabbing a gem? And then I'm running you in The One Who Watches Below, and you went right up the wall after a cursed gem and turned into a spider. And I just went, ooh, there's karma. She's a bitch.
Yeah, the family karma just revolved. Okay, now here, this next one. It's an interesting thought process that's ended up at something pretty banal and mundane. This goes to last episode. We talked about splitting up loot and financially monitoring and measuring treasure values. Okay. And it's really investing your loot. What do you do with it? You can either invest it or you can spend a lot of money to build something to put it in and then hire people to keep anybody from taking it out. And so we went into that. And real estate and let's see. Basically, they wanted to. It sounds like they wanted to set up a 401k and a hedge fund because they're getting into a lodge manor as their home, and then asking the characters retirement goals. Most characters I know is live till my next birthday. That's their retirement goals. Live to my next birthday. It's interesting that people think about those kind of things because, yeah, if you run a long-term campaign, money starts to pile up, and what do you do with it? You can't haul it around, and you got to pay somebody to guard it for you. That's something that people don't really think about, especially in the inflationary campaigns where they're out finding large treasure piles and physically large amounts of loot. What do you do with it? Okay. When you go out on the next adventure to find more loot, how do you make sure this loot doesn't get stolen? So they're saying investments. Well, I'm okay with that. If you got somebody in the campaign that's really into that, or if your DM's really into that, fine. Invest in the infrastructure of the local town. What a problem. What do we do with all this money?
I mean, the Tony Soprano model is good. You know, you're a bunch of murder hobos with more loot than you can carry. Start, buy a bar in the worst part of town and hire a bunch of half orcs to guard it. And you've got a hidey ho and a place to run to, and you could potentially even make money from the business.
You could do that. Yes. Yes. I have no problem with that. In fact, I think Jolly has approached that a couple of times, but only in reference to, you remember the time when you tried to. I don't ever remember an actual adventure arc where they actually did go in and buy all the businesses in the town. Pardon me, but he alluded to it. Excuse me.
It depends on what kind of character you're playing. I mean, a fighter eventually needs a castle and an army, but a wizard doesn't need all that. They just need a tower. So what do? Convert everything to gems and start accessorizing with, rings of protection and not,
And find a nice demonic spirit to enslave, to guard your tower, and you're home free. You got your tower.
If you're a cleric, sorry, you don't get to invest. You have to give it all to the church.
Yeah, that's the downside of being a cleric, unless you're a bishop. But then we won't go there. Or you're an evangelical pastor. We won't go there. And I saw, all right, the last thing here, and this ought to be interesting. It seems as though there's a prevailing trend in 5e of using intelligence as the dump stat.
What?
Yes, because somebody was so that they went online and says, "Oh, come on, what can we do to discourage this?" And one of the things was, 5 intelligence, you can't read. So I would, if somebody used a 5 as a dump stat, or even a 7 as a dump stat in intelligence, how would you handle that? I know what Gary would have done. He'd have told you were too dumb to know how to do that. You had to have somebody show you how to do that. No, you're not smart enough to figure that out. And he'd just tell you that.
Tell me what you want to do. Blah, blah, blah. No, you're too dumb to do that.
Yeah, you're sitting there, with your 8 intelligence and looking at this complex thing. Oh, well, no, you don't know how to do that. You don't know anything. Tumbler locks. You don't know anything about tumbler locks. You're an 8. So I would think that would be one quick way to discourage that. You can't read, I would say to the character that wanted to use that, son, have you, or lady, have you seen the movie Forrest Gump? You're not Forrest. Meaning, you'd like to be Forrest, but at this rating, you're not. Because Gary always figured that 9 was the normal average to 10.5, the average roll of the dice of the 3 6-siders, that 9 to 10.5 was average smarts.
So that's in real life, what?
About 190 IQ.
120
roughly 90
IQ?
to 100 IQ.
Oh.
90 to 100 IQ, average smarts. Because in the old assessment test, you weren't into the red zone until you hit below 80 and some of them below 70. And to use Forrest Gump, which is a movie everybody's seen, he was in the mid-70s when the state standard was an 80. But Mama got him 6 points extra credit. So you might have a knack, but when it comes to figuring out stuff, no. The best way to discourage that is just tell them, no, you don't know that. You can't do that. No, you can't read. You don't know what that sign says. You barely know how to speak common.
I'm still trying to figure out the question. I'm gonna take the listener's word for it that this is an issue in 5e. Although I'm dubious, let's say it really is an issue. So nobody's playing magic users, or wizards, or sorcerers, or anybody who has to have.
Well, apparently everybody who isn't is using intelligence as a dump.
Like in the old days, we would use charisma, because who cares?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We didn't care if we had a 7 charisma. So what? We have warts on our face. It's tough.
We were teenagers. We had about a sizzle charisma.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of you that were first playing. I was thank God I was past that when I started. But yeah, usually charisma was the dump stat. Usually. If you're a fighter, sometimes the dump stat was wisdom. Because you wanted to be intelligent, but yeah, if you weren't real wise, you could be impulsive and be a better fighter. We used to look into those. What do we put our crappy number on?
I've played 5e, but I've not run it, so I'm trying to put myself in 5e shoes with everything as some kind of ability check. So if there's anybody in the party that does have a high intelligence, as a DM, I would just start saying that they're always persuaded by the magic user. Well, I still don't want to do that. Dumb fighter still doesn't want to do it. Well, make a persuasion check and let the dice handle it. Does that make sense? Well, you're persuaded by the wizard's plan. You're going in first, sword guy.
Well, that's another thing. Gary would take your stats and use them against you. He'd say, "Oh, well, according to this, you're pretty gullible, so you'll do it." Yeah, if you had a low wisdom, you would be the one that got talked into doing stuff. And especially if you could have a real high intelligence, but if you had a real low wisdom, he'd let you talk yourself into doing really stupid stuff.
I'm just crippled by not being overly familiar with 5e. If it was old school, I mean, that 7 intelligence fighter, every time he went to town, there would be somebody with a really good deal on something. Look at this magic, gold ring of +1 invisibility, and he gets it home, and it's a pyrite ring of jack shit.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not even knocking 5e. It's just I watch the various pages on Facebook that are dedicated to the editions that have pages, just to see what's bubbling to the surface. And this is just something I saw earlier today. And apparently this, maybe only a couple of guys and somewhere thinking this, but I just thought, what would make you want to use intelligence as a dump stat? And if you did, how would you deal with that as a DM? Well, I know I've already said how I deal with it as a DM. You're not smart enough. Gary would have let you turn the chainsaw on backwards. If you had like a 5 or a 6 intelligence, and that you'd have done something horrible to yourself because you weren't smart enough not to. And I think that's the easiest way to deal with somebody that wants to use a dump stat. Just have stuff come up that doesn't pay to have that dump stat. And eventually they'll learn that you just need to balance out what you got. And some of them are more important than others.
Well,
it's the least.
It doesn't even have to be that binary. There's just, with great power comes great responsibility. With low dump stats comes some pain in the ass everyday stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you can expect more of it. You can expect more of it. All right, well, that's all the questions I have. What do you want to talk about?
Oh, Lord, put me on the spot. I was just here to back you up. I'm wingman and you. I'm doing great. I'll talk about what I'm working on.
All right, talk about what you're working on.
That book that I just put out, Post-Apocalyptic Monsters Fight This Mutant, was such a success that I came up with my shut-in, home alone idea of doing expansions to it. Monster Mini. And as soon as I get the print files good and square, to sell to the public, the first one will be this, the Macroid. Basically working out my COVID-19 angst.
Yeah, I think so. It's a COVID. I'm looking for you.
So, extra-dimensional beholder-looking thing with virus eye stalks from a nanoscopic universe straight out of Ant-Man and the Wasp, and 99 cents. When it's all said and done, one at a time, I'll release these things in a series, like if you remember those old Grenadier Models monster manuscripts where they did one a month.
Yeah.
get a set of monsters, a stat. This will be one at a time. So you get the 3D print mini, you get a PDF that's just like it's a page out of the book with an illustration, stats, and write up. And we'll see how many of those I can do.
Sounds interesting. I just finished a piece for Lloyd for the next maximum hit point, and I did a piece for Dungeons or Cosmo Joe. And now I'm working on a piece for Jared. I'm writing up my apothecary and emporium in his city, and that's gonna. I probably will have too many words.
That's so in your wheelhouse, man. You got to be having fun with that. A whole Tim Kask apothecary full of crap.
Oh yeah, it goes 4 levels down, and all the levels have various house cats, like feral cats. Except as you go deeper down, the ordinary tabby looking cats do nastier and nastier things to you if you upset them. So a little danger hiding in plain sight type thing.
I'll pay you $20 to make the head shopkeeper, the apothecary, Peter Ustinov from Logan's Run, with all the cats.
You got a deal. I'll even describe him as looking remarkably like an old idol called Ustinov.
All right, I'm PayPaling you right now.
All right, you got a deal. All right, well, until next week, everybody, or next time, if I learn everything by then, everybody shelter in place if you're supposed to. Wear a mask if you go out. Yeah, they suck and you can't breathe through them well, but that means that some of the germs are getting caught.
You can even make one out of a dice bag, gamers.
Yeah, only if you want to smother yourself in that one.
Well,
but, Cheryl and I are wearing them when we go out. If we get out of the car, I put on a mask. I put on a mask to get it pump gas the other day. So anyway, if you got comments, commentary, complaints, or kudos, to where to leave them on YouTube. Now Jim's going to do his magic and upload it for me so that it will appear on YouTube sometime within the next 36 hours, we think.
You're saying that like it's going out live. They'll already know it went out when they see this.
Well, but they don't know when we posted it and when it got out there.
Well, it'll be tomorrow, Saturday. Yeah. See you on Saturday.
Okay, well, that works. A lot of people listen to this on Saturday morning eating breakfast, I've been told. I think you told me that one time.
Oh, I do. I get up and have my coffee, and I can't eat sugared cereal anymore, but it's just like that. Saturday morning cartoons with Tim.
All right. On that, I will sign off with my traditional, what's now becoming traditional. Take care of yourselves. Shelter in place. We will get through this. Us gamers can play online together. We can make sure we're reaching out, taking care of all the people, especially the first responders and the nurses. I know I'm married to a retired nurse whose skills don't apply to what we're doing now, but we will get through this. None of us are going to duck this. And Dodata Govi.
See ya.
Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's a curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller. The curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard grave. PSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.